as Isabel presented, I'm a senior program officer at ICMM. I lead the innovation and climate change areas. And currently at ICMM, we're leading collaboration across the supply chain to accelerate the development of the new generation of mining fleet to improve their health, environmental, and safety performance. So it is a great pleasure to be here today with this very interesting panel where companies will share insights on the challenges and opportunities of innovative haulage system for the sector. So, hi, right now I can't see my panel. I don't know if great.
Hey, Veronica.
Yes. Thank you. Just gonna wait for everyone so I can see the faces. I think we're missing Andre. Great, thank you. So Isabel already introduced you a bit, but I think before starting, I'm gonna give you each of you like brief 30 seconds to introduce yourself and specifically maybe mention the role you have in your company thinking in new systems of material transportation for the mining sector. So Fred, can I start with you?
Yes, thank you, Veronica. I'm Fred Stanford, just shy of 40 years in the industry. Started at Inco in Sudbury some close to 40 years ago and spent about 28 years there. And left that operation as the president of the operations, and then moved over to Torex Gold as CEO, and most recently as chairman of the board.
Great,
30
thanks.
seconds.
Thanks. And then Brian, then Andre, please.
Yeah, my name is Brian Huff. I'm currently the vice president of technology for the Artisan division at Sandvik. I was actually one of the co-founders of Artisan back in 2003. And I'm kind of the technical lead for the company. And my expertise is really in battery systems and electric drivetrains. I started working in battery systems for automotive world back in 1994. So it's been 26 years of batteries and motors, and there's been quite a bit of evolution there. Artisan was acquired a couple years ago by Sandvik. Actually, our 2-year anniversary of acquisition, I think, is like today or tomorrow. So we're relatively new to the Sandvik family, and really excited to be a part of it, and pushing this technology forward.
Great, thanks. And Andre?
Yeah, my name is Andre Berrio. I'm a product manager for electric vehicles for Epiroc up here in Canada. I've been with the company about 15 years and was heavily involved in our first foray into battery electric vehicles. It's not quite 10 years ago now, we're getting close. And we've recently launched our second generation of electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, and really excited to bring good news and good word about electrification to the rest of the world on behalf of Epiroc.
Great, thanks. And Koen, on your side, and then we'll go to Jason.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks, Veronica. So from my side, Koen Lengi, part of ENGIE's hydrogen business unit. More specifically, I'm heading up our mining program, where we really targeting the mining sector and looking for different hydrogen solutions that can help them reach their decarbonization targets, which are quite challenging. And probably within the discussion, I'll mention some of these ideas and topics that we're working on.
And finally, Jason. Sorry, Jason, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes, perfect.
Sorry about that. So yeah, my name is Jason Green, and I am the president of GFS Corp. And we were founded in 2007 to basically bring dual fuel technologies to high horsepower off-road markets. The team here, our history is converting high horsepower engines used in stationary power generation over to dual fuel diesel natural gas operation. And we saw an opportunity to kind of export some of that knowledge and know-how into the mining market, and we've been doing that since about 2007.
Great, thanks for that brief introduction. And we have a really tight time frame, so let's get right into the discussion. So I'm going to start with mining companies. And Fred, I know that Torex Gold Resources has been working on a new hauling system for one of your underground operations. Could you please give us more details of the solution design, and how do you see its implementation will impact, the broader operation of the site? Okay, maybe I'll jump into, because we do have a tight.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now
Sorry,
we
I
can
couldn't get my mouse to go off the other screen. Okay, so the genesis of this idea started about 30 years ago with a number of us that were working in Inco and Sudbury. And we started to look at an underground mine really as a logistics business. And it was an unusual logistics business in that we created our own product, and we also had to create our own roads. But nonetheless, we moved a lot of material, and it's a business of organizing to move a lot of material. And when we looked at that logistics business, because the machines are wide and tall, they required very big tunnels, which were very expensive to excavate. But on top of that, they, because the machines were so big, they took the whole tunnel. So really, we were operating a logistics business on single lane roads, which is not a very efficient way to run a logistics business. So it was a bit of a backroom project. I can almost call it a weird hobby. We tried to find a way to get 2-lane traffic in a tunnel that is twice the size, or half the size, sorry, shrunk down so it's cheaper. And 30 years of working on it, about 5-6 years ago, we kind of finally figured out the last piece of it. And we started to build the equipment, and we have been successful in creating 2-lane traffic for our haulage systems, regardless of whether it's people or supplies or equipment. We've been successful in also steepening the ramps. So they're 4 times steeper than conventional. And when they're 4 times steeper, they're only 1/4 the length to achieve the same elevation change, which we need in a mine. So we can now make ramps and tunnels at 30 degrees, and our haulage systems run quite efficiently on that. So we use a monorail-based system. So basically we run trains. They can climb at 30 degrees. And the power units are battery electric locomotives, which basically the mine is completely diesel free at that point. And the battery locomotive is perhaps less challenging than some other battery power systems, because our weight to machine ratio, our payload to machine ratio is so much lower. The machine weighs much less than the locomotive. Okay. It has advantages for automation because you're on rails, you don't need to steer. And it also has another advantage from an automation point of view, is because it's a cog drive, you can count teeth as you go, so you know exactly where you are. The impact of the operations, we expect to be a 30% reduction in capital cost, 30% reduction in operating cost, and well more than 30% reduction in the time it takes to build a mine, basically because the tunnels are so much shorter to achieve elevation change. So that's where we are. We're just finishing up the testing in the next 2 or 3 months, and it's ready to go after a brief 30-year incubation period.
Thanks, Brent. That's very interesting. And now maybe moving into a more of an OEM perspective, I'm gonna give the same question to Brian and Andre, and you can answer separately. You both companies are leaders in terms of commercialization, of development and commercialization of zero emission vehicles now for underground operations. Can we please hear from you? What would you say are the main technical challenges and also commercial challenges when thinking of decarbonizing mining fleets, and what has been your experience? So maybe we can start with Brian, then with Andre.
Yeah, actually, it's from our perspective, we think that the products are really ready for this. And I think that's kind of news to a lot of people in the industry. And that represents what the real challenge is. It's about education and awareness from the customer base that these technologies are available, they're fully capable, and that's really, I think, the biggest challenge. And I, everyone in the mining industry, it's, we've been involved in mining now for the last 12 years, and this industry is full of people who are able to do the impossible, and it makes you think that mining companies are willing to take on the world and take on any challenge, but reality is they're actually quite conservative. I think there's so much risk in the rest of the business that when there's things that, any additional risk is like too much. And so I think that sort of feeling of fear of the new, coupled with the risks being taken for development of new mines and that kind of thing is really where the challenge is. And so getting example cases out there, business cases that have been successful, is really the biggest hurdle. We've had product in the field now for 11 years. We've got more than 50 pieces of equipment that use all our battery systems and driveline systems. And I think that's one of the messages that I'm out there to try to get out there, is that this is not a science project. These are not experimental vehicles. This is production equipment that's been going on for over a decade. And the technology is even older than that, right? So we have to kind of fight that perception that this is new, risky, and venturing off into the great unknown. It's not. It's very conventional, very, very capable, more capable than conventional diesel equipment. And it's actually a very easy transition. And it's really more about the education and understanding of what that entails, more than anything else.
Thanks, Brian. And Andre, maybe building up on Brian's answer, what would you say that it requires in terms of scaling up the technology and make it available at most sites? What would you say are main technical and commercial challenges there?
Yeah, sort of to echo what Brian said, I think battery capacity has historically always been a big technical hurdle to cross, but I think in the last 10 or 12 years, there have been huge advancements in that field. And that technology has matured to the point now where we can confidently take that underground. I think similar to the automotive industry, range anxiety is much more perceived than it is real. As Brian alluded to, these machines that are going underground now, we've proven time and time again that a BEV can easily do the same process, the same job that its diesel equivalent can do without any sacrifice to productivity. And most of the time you'll see gains there. I think 10 or 12 years ago, you could say it was possible to build an underground loader, an underground battery truck. And now we're to the point where it's not just possible, it's practical. These are practical machines, they're a viable solution. Commercially, I think product availability has been a challenge. There are a lot of different shapes and sizes of mining machines out there. And for OEMs to offer an electrified version of all of those has been challenging, but I think we're rounding that corner now. We're seeing much more diverse portfolios in all the OEMs. And I think the next big challenge will be keeping up with demand and just supplying the market with the products we have available.
Great, thanks, Andre. And a good thing about this panel is that we have, the full pack of alternatives for haulage systems. So I'm going to move with to you, Koen. And I know that ENGIE has been working for quite a few years now on, promoting green hydrogen as an energy solution for the mining sector and in general. So what would you say are, its main potential to help mines to decarbonize material movement of operations in particular?
Thanks, Veronica. So I think indeed making the connection with what was mentioned around the battery vehicles, which today, and I fully agree, these are not new technologies. Electric vehicles are coming more and more and in bigger sizes. We are more targeting the very big equipment, so the 300-ton mining haul trucks or very big locomotives moving iron ore, for example. The funny thing, and most people don't know this, but these vehicles today, they already have a fully electrical drivetrain. they just didn't manage to fit sufficient energy on board. And this is why I always like to call it, they put a diesel battery, so they put a diesel genset to generate the electricity that they need to power these vehicles. And I think this is where hydrogen, because of the high energy density that it has, it provides a very nice complementary, and I say complementary because we're not just putting fuel cell with hydrogen, we are combining with the battery technology because there is advantages for both technologies, where the battery gives you a rapid response in terms of power and allows you to do recovery of braking energy. The hydrogen provides you larger autonomy with less volume, and it also allows you for fast refueling of huge quantities of energy. So certainly for these big vehicles, we consider that hydrogen could be a good option. Of course, we are a little bit earlier in the development. So we are working together with one of the mining companies, Anglo American, to have a first proof of concept in South Africa a little bit later this year. And if everything goes well, then we would be rolling out this technology for a full mining site. And from there, we take it the next level and industrialize this solution. Besides this, according to our simulations, we see that the hydrogen variant could become competitive with the diesel variant as soon as 2025. And this TCO, so the total cost of ownership, will only improve going forward, because hydrogen and fuel cell technology in general, they are only at the early stage. So very similar to what we're seeing with batteries, what we have seen with PV. As the manufacturing process of these technologies increases and becomes more and more automated and so on, we will see a significant drop in the costs. And also, of course, let's say surfing on the wave of the renewables that continue to go down, the price of green hydrogen will also continue to reduce as well. So certainly there's an option for a mine to switch to this new technology without having to sacrifice on productivity nor on the cash cost that they would have today. And of course, the good thing is that they will be displacing CO2 emissions as they will stop using diesel as well.
Thanks, Koen. Yeah, and that's very important because mining haul trucks, you know, that the haul trucks account for up to 30% of Scope 1 emissions of the mining industry in general. So they're a very important piece if we're thinking, you know, the full decarbonization of the industry. And on that, I think I'm going to move with Jason. And from your experience, how do you see the role of natural gas when thinking of reducing the carbon footprint of mining fleets? And what would you say are the main benefits of using a rather well-known, you know, fuel in the industry? Maybe there's not such a hesitance from the industry, you know, when we say maybe hydrogen or batteries, but natural gas, you know, mining companies are more familiar with it. So what would you say, you know, in terms of, you know, the benefits that this technology can have?
Sure. Well, just as a bit of background, so what our company does is we also focus on large haul trucks. Typically, we're focused just because you need a lot of fuel consumption to drive savings. So we're typically focused on haul trucks above 100 tons. Most of the trucks that we focus on are in the 200 to 320 ton size range. Our company has a technology that allows you to use natural gas in these haul trucks, and we store that gas on board the trucks in the form of LNG, or liquid natural gas. So we got to liquefy the gas to basically get the energy density to a point where we can replace an appreciable amount of the diesel fuel with the natural gas. I will say that out of all the things that are being discussed on this panel, I would say that natural gas is probably the least sexy decarbonization tool out there. I think that obviously we see the future, clearly the future is going to be energy storage. That's where this is going. And I think the way that our company looks at it, the way that more importantly, some of our customers look at it, is they really see LNG in mining as kind of a bridge technology. I think the advantage that natural gas has right now is that it's available, although LNG, when we first started this business, was not widely available. It's a lot more available now in a lot of locations. And I think that most of our customers are looking at LNG as a way to to make a real impact on carbon output. Obviously, it's if we can replace 30 to 50% of the haul truck's fuel requirement with natural gas, that is not like swapping out hydrogen or batteries, where we're supplying a zero carbon fuel. We're not. Natural gas is a lot cleaner. It offers some real benefits, and therefore, I think our customers, again, they're seeing it as a way to do something now. And to be candid, I think most of our customers are looking to kind of balance the what we can do on carbon reduction, as well as can we save some money switching over to this fuel, which, depending on where you are in the world and how far the LNG has to be transported to the mine, it can be a less expensive fuel compared to diesel fuel. So that's really kind of the story of LNG, natural gas generally. It's got a role to play, and we do see where these energy storage technologies definitely are going to be the future for the OEMs. I think that's going to come on fairly rapidly. I guess where we're kind of looking, someone mentioned earlier, mining companies are conservative. It takes them a long time to kind of embrace new technologies, and there will be a legacy fleet of these diesel-powered haul trucks out there for probably quite a while. And I think that's really where we're going to be focused on. And a lot of our customers do seem to feel like natural gas can play a role in maybe a portfolio of technologies that allow them to decarbonize.
Great, thanks, Jason, on that. And I'm gonna move back to Fred. And when you're explaining, the project of Avtoric's gold resources, we see that you finally came up with a full electric design. And it seems that electrification of mines is a trend in the industry. And in your experience, from this 30-year project that you've been working on, how do you see the impact of such technologies when thinking about the full electric mine in the way that future mines will be designed? You were talking about ramps, etc. That's a new concept of mine. Do you see this being applicable across the industry, or more of a niche trend to maybe smaller size mines, or some commodity specific? Or do you think this is a trend that is here to stay?
Well, with this technology, it's designed for hard rock mines. The size of the mine doesn't matter. Because in our ramps we have at least 2-lane traffic, we can move a lot of material because 1 train or 3 trains can be going uphill while 3 trains are coming downhill, and there's no conflict the way there is with rubber-tired vehicles. So it doesn't matter to that. The ability to run at 30 degrees is particularly useful at those flat-lying ore bodies, which are particularly difficult to mine. If they're 30 degrees, 25 degrees, 40 degrees, it's kind of a miserable angle to mine. The rock doesn't fall at 40 degrees. The angle of repose tends to be closer to 65 or 70. So it works on anything. As long as we drill and blast, I don't think I would put it into a block cave mine where you don't have control of the fragmentation of the material. But any mine where you drill and blast, it works just fine. It's a haulage system. But it's an efficient haulage system because it's 2-lane traffic in a small tunnel, which is much cheaper. It's electric, which drops your ventilation needs. And the ramps are steep. And if you backhaul your backfill material, it generates a lot of electricity of its own. So we're looking at one mine design where we lift ore out of the mine with the train, and we bring cemented rock fill back underground with the same train, and it generates 90% of the energy coming downhill that it used going uphill. So it's not quite a perpetual motion machine, but it's not bad. So I don't, if you can reduce the cost by 30%, you can reduce the time to make it. I have a hard time understanding. Once the first one's built, like everybody said, miners are conservative. Everybody wants to be second. So once we get the first one built, then I think it changes the industry completely.
And Fred, just a follow-up question. What are your timeframes in terms of implementation? When do you think we will be, seeing this system implemented?
So we're testing it underground now. in sort of a side testing all the components, and we've had to design the machines and build the machines and test them and refine them and all that stuff. We've done all of that. We're now at the stage where we're testing for rates. How fast can we excavate a tunnel using this equipment? Because the tunneling equipment works off the monorail as well. How fast can we excavate from a stope with the way we do it? We should have that pretty much finalized by the end of this quarter, so by the end of March. Torex is doing a feasibility study now, which should be concluded in the end of March next year, where we're comparing the two technologies, the cost benefits, and of course, there's always a sense of concern with something new. And so we'll do a very, very thorough risk assessment of all the different processes in the mine to understand where the risks are and are they mitigatable or not. So that's sort of within Torex. It has a decision to make within about a year. And outside of that, there's a number of other companies that are looking at it as well. And they could easily be in play before Torex is, just because our next mine is a year before we start getting actively into that decision.
Thanks, Fred. And going back to the OEMs here, Epiroc and Sandvik, you before mentioned a little bit about, like maybe education or awareness of the customer. And I think that quite answers a little bit my question, but maybe we can get a little bit deep on that. How would you describe, the adoption readiness of mining companies when presenting, the opportunity to incorporate zero emission vehicles? We hear a lot about the benefits, less ventilation, less heat, even operators seem to find the vehicles more comfortable to operate. Maybe they can be even increased productivity. But what do you think is missing for this to become the new business as usual? We usually say that mines of the futures are designed with the technology of the past. So how do you think mining companies, or what it means for mining companies to start thinking that this technology is here right now and it can be used for any, maybe greenfield project or things like that. And also I know both companies have not only have innovated into the equipment, the technology, but also into the business model. These technologies usually are more intensive in CapEx and maybe lower in OpEx. And I know both companies have worked, with the battery as a service, which I think it's very interesting it's an interesting approach also to overcome some of the non-technical, challenges of this. So what do you think it's needed for this to become the new normal, Maybe Andre first and then Brian?
Yeah, sure. I think as Brian alluded to, the management of change is a huge issue. There's a lot of time and effort going into making sure the implementation of a new fleet is very safe. We've been working with customers very, very closely. The mining companies that have committed to going emissions free and are committed and have a transition ongoing, they're very keen. They're very educated. They know what they want. They're working very closely with OEMs to make sure that transition is very safe and smooth. And I'm very confident we'll have long-term success there. Battery safety is being put under a microscope, and as well it should. One of the things that we really need to help these companies with is implementation and making sure with batteries as a service, what we ensure is that the mining company doesn't have to be the expert. We can be the expert. We can be the stepping stone while you're there and help you do that transition. You're not alone. I think it's not hard to see, like we see a lot of mining companies that will be implementing this, and we're very confident that it'll have a smooth transition. And there are a lot of other mining companies that are asking all the same questions, but they're kind of taking a we'll look and see, we'll wait and see approach. And once we have a few customers that have successful implementations that we're very confident will happen, we just need a few success stories to happen, and all these looky-loos. This is going to generate a lot of consumer confidence. And I think then you'll see a snowball effect where you'll see the true shift towards zero emissions.
Great. And Brian, on that?
Yeah, I think, as this management of change, it applies to more than just the technical aspects and the operations. It's also kind of the financial aspect, right? Mining companies are used to an operating cost for fuel. They're not used to shifting that to a more of a capital cost. And so this battery as a service program is really geared toward fitting within the conventional financial infrastructure of the business, right? Because in reality, there's a significant cost savings just on the machine itself over the total life of the product, right? So if you look at the fuel cost, maintenance costs, spare parts, rebuilding engines, rebuilding transmissions, transmission fluids, filters, all that stuff. If you put all that together and look at the total cost for a battery machine versus a diesel machine, the battery machine is actually lower cost in the single-digit percentages at the moment, but of course that's going to be changing as well. So, and that's not even considering the ventilation savings and everything else. And so, but doing that math is tough, right? And so doing the battery as a service allows it to fit in the same model. This is now truly an operating expense. It's not a lease program, although you can do a lease program if that's something that they prefer. But we're just trying to fit into these traditional cost models to make that work. Another big part, talking about customer readiness, and I think one of the key innovations that Sandvik is really focused on is minimizing infrastructure changes for the customer. So our batteries, and this was talked about some of the others as well, right? Fuel cells are really about the ability to refuel quickly. Our strategy in Epirox as well is to swap batteries. That can be done really, really quickly. And so you can get a full charge, another 4 hours of runtime, maybe more, depending on the operation, but you can get another change in batteries in less than 10 minutes. And our new system is less than 5 minutes. And so you really have very, very minimal downtime, and the batteries can be recharged before the machine needs them again. And one of our key innovations is that the machine swaps its own batteries. So you can actually bring a battery with you to a remote location, work half a shift on one battery, swap batteries right in the stope, you with a second battery, finish your shift. So there's really no change in operation, no change in infrastructure. You don't need cranes, you don't need anything else. So it's really kind of a simple transition. And that's kind of the message we're trying to get out, is that this can be implemented right now. No reason to wait.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it seems like the industry needs more real case studies that we can all learn from. It's something that I've been hearing from mining companies. Like, we need real data, we need something, the real numbers, so we can get that into. So hopefully those experience will come soon. And Koen, I want to ask you a little bit more generally speaking, because you're more of an integrator and a solution provider, in general. What do you think it's necessary to enable mines to adopt zero emission technologies in general? I know we're not talking about decarbonization of vehicles, but we understand, at least we and ICMM, we have seen that, of course, that it doesn't matter to only worry about tailpipe emission. We need to decarbonize the whole system. That includes the power supply, etc. So you not only the truck or whatever equipment is, but you need the whole full enabling environment. And I think you can give us that perspective of a little bit outside the mine and the fleet. And what do you think it's needed to enable, as I said, mines for zero emission technologies in general?
Yeah, certainly. And I think already some great points have been mentioned by Brian and Andrea. So clearly there's the change management and the awareness. And most mines, we have seen impressive change in the sustainability targets that they have put and their, let's say, mission and vision. So this helps. Clearly there is the financial change, as Brian alluded to. We should not look at a fuel cost anymore. We should really look at a TCO, at total cost of ownership, and really at a system play for the mines. And this goes beyond swapping diesel with batteries or hydrogen for a truck. It might actually be, and I love the example from Fred, that we are going to change completely how we extract the minerals, right? So I think the system play and daring to look out of the box is key. This is not always easy because the miners, of course, they're used to the way of working and they have a lot of pressure on the productivity and delivering on this side. But we see a trend more and more going in this direction, mostly because from the top management, they have this push And even more importantly, from their investors, there is also the push to decarbonize their operations. I think beyond this, also just to underline the safety aspect, this is key. If we can show them that it's safe and that the right norms and standards are in place, this will certainly enable them to adopt these technologies sooner. This is one of the key areas that we are working on within ENGIE for the hydrogen. And besides this, I think there is making the connection as well with the end usage of these minerals. We always like to say at ENGIE that mining these days is really at the center of the energy transition. I think the more and more people realize this, and the miners themselves realize this, and connect with their end customers to really try and close the loop. Just to give an example, if you are extracting, let's say, bauxite to make aluminium, to make an electric vehicle, and so on, we really need to close this loop and make sure that the customers and everybody in this value chain is fully aware with what they call the life cycle assessment of these minerals. And I think this customer-driven approach will certainly enable the miners to adopt some of the technologies quicker as well. And of course, there is always policy. So if they get some guidelines from the countries where they're active and so on, this will certainly support. But yeah, I think the awareness and the change management coming from the top and connecting with the customers is key. And of course, they have to open up, and this is happening. And we have to go to more and more open collaborative platforms to accelerate. And this is where, as some of the examples that were given, miners are getting together with the OEMs, with technology providers, with integrators such as ourselves, really to accelerate, to find a solution. Where technology used to take a lot of time, today the technological cycles are very short. And if we work together, we can really leverage on this evolution.
Great, thanks, Koen. And I think also it's important, at least from your perspective, especially when you have, isolated mines, that you can design, the full system to run, renewable sources and offer, the full solution to mines that are not connected to the grid, right?
Yeah, certainly. And the mines that are not remote, some of the things that we're looking as well is how can they benefit from other industries, other, let's say, consumers that are around them and vice versa. So really the system play is becoming more and more important as well.
Yeah, definitely. We need to start finding those synergies across sectors. And Jason, let me get back to you. So how would you describe the response you get from mining companies, in terms of, I know that mining companies are not always willing to maybe do retrofits into their equipment. And do you see any major concern in terms of doing this, even when you consider, the benefits you were mentioning, LNG as a bridge technology, and probably for some companies that they want to do, like start getting into some action right now, this could be a very interesting alternative. So, but do you see any, in terms of willingness, are they willing to start doing the retrofit? Because we're talking about the large mining haul trucks. So what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, so a lot of this from the customer's perspective is driven by risk management, and they have to know that there isn't, number one, there's not a safety risk. That was probably our single biggest hurdle in getting this technology off the ground with miners, because as everyone who's listening to this knows, safety comes first. And certainly bringing in a new fuel, especially a cryogenic sort of technical fuel like LNG, early in the process, we had a lot of challenges around making sure that we were mitigating all the risks that they perceived and getting past that process to actually get to pilot projects and commercial projects. And then just as big or almost as big is the perception of production risk. In other words, in what way can adopting this fuel somehow risk their production? And I think that when we first launched the business, we probably spent about 80% of our time really taking deep dives with our customers on safety issues, because it was brand new. I think that over the past, say, 5 to 7 years, LNG has become much more well known. The technology around it, the fuel storage systems, has really matured a lot. So I think the perception of risk has really decreased. We still talk about safety, but I would say for most of our discussions with our mining customers, we spend maybe now 20% of the time really just talking purely about the safety aspects. That's almost kind of a given now. And now we get more into issues of production risk, and really what that comes down to is how does bringing LNG into a large mining operation with large haul vehicles, how does that change their world? How many more do they have to refuel more often than they used to on diesel fuel? Any of these things, when we're building out our financial models of what a project looks like, it's something we have to take into account. The truck has to fuel one more time in a 24-hour cycle. That's a significant impact on production and production cost. So those are probably the two biggest hurdles that we have to get past. The first one, like I said, it's kind of when we first started the business, we were the ones that were kind of coming in and introducing LNG as a potential fuel to our mining customers. And now we get calls, every day from mining companies all over the world. They've already made the decision that they'd like to investigate the possibility of using LNG. And now it's really just about, how do you do it? How do you execute that? What infrastructure needs to come along with our conversion technology for the trucks to allow you to store it at site, dispense it at site, and so forth. And then I think probably the only other, because we're a retrofit technology, one of the things that we have to always be aware of in our projects is that for haul trucks that are outside the OEM warranty period, it's a pretty easy lift to get those trucks converted. If it's a mine that's got some newer trucks or a brand new mine and all the haul trucks have just been supplied by the OEM, you get into these warranty issues where understandably OEMs are going to be concerned about anyone kind of sort of fiddling with their trucks with this type of technology. So I would say that's probably been one of the other barriers from the customer's perspective is, again, it gets back to risk, is doing something that would potentially void OEM warranties. But by and large, most of our customers are not running around with brand new haul trucks. So the warranty has not been too big of an issue.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So I see that we don't have much time left, but before we finish, I wanted to, just ask an open question and to any of you, or maybe all of you, I don't know. Some of you mentioned it during your answers, but considering how expectations from investors, customers, and I would say even society in general have increased in terms of climate action, not only setting targets but climate action from companies. How do you think the industry, and when I say industry, I mean mining companies and suppliers, the whole value chain, can accelerate the development, and both the development and the uptake of innovative haulage systems? So how do you think this, increasing pressure is, maybe accelerating the pace at which mining companies and suppliers are adopting and developing technology? And what else it's needed? You could mention a little about, collaboration. What else is needed? Do we need more resources, capital allocation? What do you think? Awareness, Brian mentioned, education. What do you think it's needed to, as I said before, hauling represent a large part of the, the emissions from the mining sector. So if we don't tackle hauling, probably we won't achieve the full decarbonization of the industry. So this is an open question. I don't know who wants to start. Just go ahead.
It's Fred here. I'll take a quick start, having worked with investors for many years, and they too are very, very nervous about change. It's not just the management, the investors, and like when we built our project, we put two very innovative pieces of technology into the mine we have now. And as the CEO at the time, I did 4 years of getting beaten up by investors for including this in the design, and then we knew it was the right thing to do. We did it, it worked fine. But there was significant reductions because these people are held to account, maybe now more ESG, but back then they're also held account to their financial performance. And so if you're taking this risk and it doesn't work, they don't get their financial performance and they're accountable for that. And so in that model, and that's what I like about ours, is that the financial benefit of 30% of capital reduction and 30% of operating cost reduction, which is really quite straightforward because the mine is very much simpler. And 30+ reduction in the time between capital investment and revenue. When the number is that meaningful, then the risk, the financial risk to the investor drops quite significantly. If the financial numbers are quite close, then they too like to be second. But when there's a big gap, then I think you'll have more people willing to take a chance on it.
Maybe I could jump on top of that one there, because I totally agree with what you're saying there, Fred. And I almost hesitate to say this because in general, I'm not a real fan of regulation, but maybe the government needs to take the choice out of your hands. It's kind of like for your own good, right? Everyone knows, there's all these case studies showing that there's a financial benefit to this. There's a health benefit to this. There's a productivity benefit to this. It's good for everyone, but that risk is the major barrier. And you as a CEO is taking it all on yourself. If you could go to your investors and say, you know what, government says we have to, guys, we have to, right? Then they'll do it, and actually everyone will benefit from it. It's one of the few times that I would say that kind of government regulation actually is beneficial. But like I think about the mine ventilation regulations in Canada, where it's dictated by installed horsepower and things like that. It's not ideal. It's really not appropriate because it should be based more on like a CANMET type analysis. But that financial factor makes it very clear and makes it easier for those Canadian mining companies to make this decision. And so in that case, like, I don't want them to change and really make these regulations more accurate or appropriate. It needs to be hard to do diesel, because you really have to start asking that question. When you're starting a new mine right now, everyone says, well, should we go battery? And it's really like, should we do diesel? You got to start asking the opposite question. Justify why diesel is a good business case. You won't, right? So that's kind of my take. It's really maybe a little unpopular choice, but I think that the OEM or mine companies have to have an excuse for why they're making this decision. And they need to say that the risk is actually something they have to do.
Thanks, Brian. And Andre, Jason, Koen, something on that?
What I see as well is I see some of the major players are making that commitment. The being socially responsible is now, it's not just a corporate slogan. For a lot of, it's a true core value. And now more than ever, being innovative and being socially responsible does not mean that you can't be profitable, and does not mean that you can't be, you have to lose productivity. They go hand in hand now. They don't have to exclude one another. At Epiroc, our slogan is dare to think new, our vision, dare to think new. And we encourage our customers and everybody else in the industry to do the same. Go ahead, challenge us as OEMs. That's how we all move forward in the business.
Thanks.
I would say from our perspective, we have seen a significant change. I'll kind of mirror what the gentleman just said. When we first launched our business, when we were giving one of these pitches to a room full of senior management at a large mine, there might be one guy in the room that was interested in the emissions angle on this, or no guys in the room. And frankly, if we even brought up the idea of lowering emissions, we would get a bunch of eye rolls. Like, nobody wanted to hear that. We're miners, we don't care about that stuff. But now, I mean, when we go to have these meetings, everyone in the room is interested in this. Everyone knows they've got to do something. They know they got to improve the emissions picture. So we've really seen a real change. And we don't think this is not greenwashing anymore. This is, people are legitimately looking for ways to lower their emissions. from our perspective, we really always we always want our technology to be something that it's not pushed, it's pulled. We want to show them that there's value there, let them internalize that, let them do their own internal studies and say, yes, this is something that we want. And then we provide the solution. But I will say that, especially when you're dealing with the larger global mining companies, I think they are really on board with this. Granted, they're risk averse, they have their process, they're slow. But I think we're kind of on the cusp of seeing some real change over the next couple of years with all the large mining companies.
So the question I have is that choice due to regulation, like emissions regulation, or is it truly because they think it's the right thing to do? I mean, in our experience, they will choose the right thing to do if it doesn't cost them more money. And so we're all about creating that equal business opportunity and a benefit, cost benefit. And in some cases, the ventilation regulations from the government are actually what are defining the financial benefit for these things, right? The fact that you have to spend the money on ventilation and ventilation power because of the regulation means that there's a real financial benefit on that side. You know, are they really doing it just to be green?
If I could comment, as an executive who hasn't spent a lot of time, spent so much time on this new technology that I haven't spent a lot of time looking at existing battery technology for rubber tired fleets. But I would say, as an executive, my perception is that battery gear is more expensive by about 25%. That's my uninformed perception. So this total ownership cost, I can't remember what the three letters were I heard earlier. That message hasn't gotten through to me. I don't know that I've ever seen a number that had that in it. I have seen numbers that say it's 25% more expensive to run battery gear. So
I can elaborate on that a little. It's more expensive up front.
Yeah.
But the parts cost, like our electric motors and driveline systems and everything, and the brakes even, last the life of the machine. There's no transmission, there's no midlife rebuild.
Yeah.
The cells are the only consumable, right? Cells have to be replaced after 3 to 5 years, kind of depending upon the usage. So there is that's a consumable that is dramatically offset by the savings on diesel fuel. So total cost of ownership is positive, not even including ventilation savings. So it's just, but it is an upfront capital increase, at least in the near term, because of the new technology, volumes, and all that kind of stuff. But of course, that'll also be decreasing over time.
What about decarbonizing open pit fleets? So we discussed a little bit on this. I know 200, 300 tons haul trucks. Is the challenge the higher payload in terms of, I think the question is whether, it's the higher payload in terms of the energy required or maybe the power required. I don't know, maybe Jason or Koen, you have more experience on the open pit.
Well, yeah, just briefly from our standpoint, I think maybe that's more directed at some of the energy storage technologies. But as far as our technology is concerned, we're working with the existing prime mover. So whatever that truck is capable of doing on diesel, it can do on dual fuel. Our challenge is getting enough of the LNG on board one of these large haul trucks to make a meaningful dent in the overall diesel consumption. And although the trucks are very, very large, and that sounds like it should be an easy thing, there's not a lot of free space available. So we have to get pretty creative in terms of how we get the LNG on board. And the LNG does not have the same energy density as diesel fuel. It's actually significantly less, and it's also has to be stored in a cylinder. So you can't be creative in terms of a conformal tank design. So those are kind of really our challenges, but I'll let someone else speak to the energy storage challenges.
I'll comment real quick. Sandvik's not into surface haulage equipment, but it's not a technical hurdle from our standpoint. I think the only small detractor for the open pit fleet is that you lose a little bit of the more obvious financial benefit because there's no ventilation requirements for open pit. But it would, I would argue, very, very, very good business case for a TCO improvement, offsetting diesel cost alone on a battery operated fleet. And if you can do trolley in an open pit, things like that, you could potentially see long-term savings from a performance standpoint and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's definitely scalable. You just don't have that compounding benefit of ventilation savings.
Yeah, maybe also what you were talking about regulation, maybe, you know, carbon taxes in certain jurisdictions can help with that, with a stronger business case maybe. Kun, any thoughts about it? You having worked on this hydrogen truck, probably same challenges that Jason was mentioning in terms of, you know, the design of a truck. You need, you know, different kind of storage, have to a little bit redesign the truck, right?
Yeah, indeed. So you have to deal with an existing truck platform, which again, it's electric drivetrain, but there's still some mechanical system attached to the diesel genset. So this is a challenge, but there's nothing really that can be overcome with the technology we have today. The thing about Openpit is that generally they're going for very large trucks. So you have to scale up the battery system, the fuel cell system, which comes with, let's say, thermal challenges, integration challenges. But again, nothing that we cannot overcome, but somebody has to do it first, and then based on the experience and making sure everything is safe as well, we can then scale up the solution. I think probably for the open pit as well, you want to keep as much flexibility as possible in the operations, simply of how these kind of open pit mines are operated versus the underground mines. I'm not the mining expert, but in our exchanges with some of the mining companies, the flexibility of the power system for these trucks is key within the open pits as well.